Hey, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for joining. So yesterday was the big reveal for the next generation 2024 Dodge Charger Daytona. And it was a well-produced event, and it was yesterday, as I mentioned, and Tim Kuniskis it was basically a 10-minute pre-recorded event, pre-recorded video, and Tim Kuniskis, he's really quite a marketeer. He was the star of this. And it started off where he was in the next generation 2024 Charger Daytona, and he went back into the past, back to 1910, and spoke to the Dodge boys, the Dodge brothers. And he was talking about the history of Dodge and so forth, and he was speeding around. And again, it's sort of typical of some of the other Dodge videos we've seen recently, within the past 10 years, of the Hellcats and the SRTs and Scat Packs racing around. They did this too with the Charger, with one of the Dodge boys in the car with them. And so again, it looked really cool. It was hearkening back to the racier days of Dodge with the V8s, the V8 muscle cars, even though this was an electric. And what he tried to do is Tim Kuniskis basically tried to convince us that this is a real muscle car, that this is the next evolution in muscle cars, going from the Hemis and the Hellcats to this. And, Tim Kuniskis kind of reminds me of Arnold Schwarzenegger in the past when he was at his height making movies. And, even when he made some really bad movies, I'm thinking of like Commando or Raw Deal, he'd go on the talk shows and he'd go, well, this is just a fantastic movie. You got to see it. It's one of my best. And of course, we all knew that they weren't. But again, Arnold was great at promoting his movies, just like Tim Kuniskis is fantastic at promoting Dodge products. And that's exactly what he did. So let me tell you a little about my thoughts on the new Charger. First of all, based on the reveal of the prototype back in 2022, a lot of people didn't like the looks of it. Again, just the electrics aside and so forth, they just didn't like the way it was designed. I did. I kind of thought it was a really good-looking car. And this production version, or soon-to-be production version, pretty much looks a lot like the prototype. And again, I really like it. And now that we've seen some more pictures and some more angles, I really like the design. And again, it's really sleek. It looks great, looks sporty. And it kind of looks sort of in the same vein of the old fastback Chargers and so forth. I like it. I like it a lot. So again, that's drivetrain aside. Also, one of the other great things about it is it's a two-door and a four-door. And this kind of reminds me of the past when, let's look at the past Mopars. You had, a Satellite, an old Plymouth Satellite in the late 60s, early 70s, and there was a two-door version and there was a four-door version. Same thing with the Plymouth Fury, the Dodge Monaco. There was a two-door and a four-door versions of all of them, instead of having a separate nameplate for two-door versus four-door. Recently, in the last, again, 10, 15 years, we had the Dodge Charger that was a four-door and the Challenger, which was a two-door. But again, this is really cool in that the Charger is a two and a four-door. And the thing about it is when you look at the pictures of the two-door and the four-door, the body lines kind of look exactly the same. It doesn't look like a different vehicle or kind of like an elongated vehicle. It still looks like the same vehicle with the same beautiful lines, but they've just put four doors in one version and two doors in another. So I think that's really great. I think that's really cool. The interior too, they put a lot of work into the interior. Again, not like when they went into the K-car days of the 1980s where it looked so blocky and plastic. This is a really beautiful interior. Although with one caveat, it's a beautiful interior given that it's got sort of the video screen design as opposed to analog gauges, the speedometer gauge, the speedometer gauge, tachometer, and so forth. But it looks really cool. The switchgear is really nice. It just really is a beautiful looking interior, in my view, that is. So that's kind of the deal on what I think of the looks of it. Now the drivetrain. It's going to come initially in a couple different electric versions. One of them will be called the Scat Pack. It's supposedly got 670 horsepower and is expected to reach 0 to 60 in 3.3 seconds. Again, this is all electric. And another thing, it said that all the Chargers will be all-wheel drive, and that's really great. And, you know, when you say 670 horsepower, I don't know how that exactly equates to the, you know, internal combustion engine horsepower, but that's what they're calling it. And again, 0 to 60 in 3.3 seconds with all-wheel drive is really fast. That's the Scat Pack version. There's also going to be a Charger Daytona RT version. It's a little less horsepower. It's 496 horsepower. Again, it's still up there if it is indeed equivalent to a gasoline engine horsepower. So that's great. As I mentioned, all-wheel drive, which is fantastic. They talked about the Charger Daytona Banshee, which is what they really initially discussed during the reveal of the prototype back in 2022. And they said that is coming later next year. And they didn't give any horsepower ratings on that, but the scuttlebutt is that it's going to be somewhere between 800 and 1,000 horsepower, and maybe it'll start off in the 800 range, and then you'll be able to sort of upgrade it via paying extra money and having a software download, I'm sure. So that's it. The other great news is that there will be an internal combustion version of this, actually 2 internal combustion versions initially, and that is something that a lot of people have been thinking that was going to happen.
Oh yeah, that wasn't the sound of the fratsonic chamber in the Banshee. That was the scream of the most power-dense internal combustion engine Dodge has ever installed in a muscle car. In 2025, the all-new Charger will also be available as a 6-pack with the twin-turbo Hurricane. Standard output hits the streets with 420 horsepower, and the HO spins the dyno to 550 horsepower.
Unfortunately, not the V8. Tim Kuniskis said the last call Chargers and Challengers and V8 muscle cars stopped in 2023, actually 2024 for the Durango and the TRX pickup truck and so forth. But again, they will not come in the new Charger. They will only be the straight 6 versions, and they call it a 6-pack. It's not really a 6-pack like a 340 6-pack, 3 2-barrel carburetors, but they're calling it a 6-pack because it's 6-cylinder. And again, they're the twin-turbo, 3-liter, straight 6 Hurricane engine. Now, it is great that there's an internal combustion engine option. That is fantastic. It's not going to be the V8 muscle car that some were hoping for. However, if there are people out there that want a 4-door or even a 2-door family car that's not an electric, that doesn't have the disadvantages of an electric, they do have that gas option. It will be fast, but again, it's just not a V8. You know, there are so many cars out there that are turbocharged, 4 cylinders, turbocharged 6. They're fast. They just have a different feel, a different sound, a different torque curve and so forth, but it is good that they did decide to do that. It gives Chrysler some flexibility. I think if they went all electric with this Charger, it would be a flop and Dodge would be in big trouble. Another thing they're trying to do with the electrics, and again, they're trying to appeal to the V8 muscle car crowd, and that is there are going to be a whole bunch of drive mode and race options. For example, there are going to be some drive modes called donut mode, so you can do donuts, drift mode. There's going to be a line lock, kind of a launch control similar to the V8 muscle cars. There's going to be a bunch, something called race prep, and there'll be the performance pages similar to what we have on the SRT vehicles now. So that's it. Those are some of the ins and outs. One thing Tim Kuniskis did, which was really good, he mentioned that electric vehicles are not new, that basically there were electric cars before gas cars. This is true. I've mentioned it in at least a couple of my previous videos. They had electric cars in the late 1800s before gas cars. And then, and they were starting to get popular, but then when the internal combustion engines came out, they overtook the electric vehicles and basically put them out of business. So it's kind of like Tim Kuniskis mentions, we're coming back around. And I don't know whether he thinks that's a good idea, because it's not as though we've discovered some new technology or all of a sudden electric cars are great. They're mandated by the federal government. So in any event, this is what the new Dodge Charger Daytona is all about. He is trying to push the electric cars, and as mentioned, they have this fratzonic chambered exhaust system that makes a simulated V8 experience. But again, I don't know why they call it an exhaust chamber. It's not an exhaust chamber. If anything, it's a chambered speaker, like a stereo speaker. But there's not an exhaust coming out of an electric car, so make no mistake about that. I think it's a stupid gimmick. They're probably spending a lot of money trying to make it sound like a V8. It's not a V8. Tim Kuniskis also was mentioning that, they're fighting the system. They don't want to comply, but they are complying with electric cars, but they're basically trying to go in a little different route. They're not trying to do it because it's green and efficient. They're taking what they have to work with, and they're making these great fast cars. So in any event, we'll see how they sell. I think that they're going to sell under one condition, given the circumstances, and that includes the electrics and the straight six Hurricane engines, and that is based on price. There's only going to be demand for these if the price is reasonable. But if we've seen anything lately from Stellantis, it's been that they've jacked the prices up past the point where most people can afford them or want to afford them. So these will sell and there'll be a demand for these if the price is reasonable, and that means for the electrics and for the Hurricane straight six engines. But in any event, that's kind of what's going on. I know there's also in the electrics what's called the erupt transmission to sort of simulate the transmissions in gas cars. There may be more to it than just a sound or a feeling. It may actually help put it into a different gear so that there'll be more of a speed range, but we'll see when that comes out. That's about it from now. I hope I didn't forget anything. These are my initial thoughts. Given the premiere yesterday, we still don't have pricing. They're going to come out in the end of this model year. They are going to be 2024s. And as I mentioned, next year, the gas versions of those will come out as 2025s, along with, as they mentioned, the high-performance Banshee version of the Charger Daytona. So, hope you enjoyed my video today. If you did, please like it. Also, subscribe to my channel and hit the notification bell. Those things really help a lot. Thanks for joining. Take care. We'll see you next time.